What a headshot! What a head!
How's it, guys? This is Dayvy, FPL, and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. And on this video, I'm going to take you guys through the last ultimate guide of the season. It's going to be the finale for Game Week 38. It's a little bit of a sad occurrence there, but don't worry, this isn't going to be the final video. We will have the team selection hopefully tomorrow. Then obviously the deadline stream coming up 1 hour before the deadline on Sunday. So please make sure that you guys don't miss the final deadline stream. Put notifications on for YouTube or for my Twitter page, as I will give you guys a reminder when I do go live. Otherwise, just simply put it in your alarm. But now turning our attention to this video, I'm going to be going over some nice talking points, including differentials that you guys can target to win those mini leagues. Also, we'll be talking about the fixtures that you guys can target and the players. And then I'll wrap up the video like I usually do with the captaincy decision. So that's something you guys are interested in? Sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. So the first talking point I want to go over is going to be about one man and one man only. It's going to be Mo Salah. So the general consensus right now is that we have not had enough news to make a decision on Mo Salah, but hopefully Jurgen Klopp will give us some insight in the press conference coming up either tomorrow or we might get news on Saturday. So if you guys don't know, Mo Salah actually picked up an injury in the FA Cup final against Chelsea around the 20-minute mark, and because of those 5 substitutions, he actually was taken off as a precaution. Now, Jurgen Klopp did say that Mo Salah should be back for the Champions League final, and that is going to be 6 days after this last Prem game, but that doesn't exactly fill me with confidence of him actually starting against Wolves on the weekend. So as of recording this video, which is going to be Thursday, we have not had enough news to make a decision about Mo Salah, and therefore I'm going to be excluding him from most of our decisions in terms of transfers and also captaincy decisions. But if we do get news about Mo Salah potentially starting, I think that he will start and come off early. I think as a precaution for this Champions League final, he probably will get about 60 to 70 minutes. But knowing the Egyptian, he's definitely going to want to play to kind of defend that golden boot. If Mo Salah does not start, it's going to be quite interesting to see how the Liverpool side actually shapes up. I think right now, if Mo Salah does start at right wing, we will see Sadio Mane at striker and then Luis Diaz as left wing. I think that Trent and Robbo will obviously play because they were rested against Southampton a couple of days ago. But if Mo Salah does not feature, it's going to be interesting to see if Sadio Mane drops to left wing, maybe Luis Diaz to right and Jota up the middle, or if we will still continue to see Mane at that striker position. The reason I'm saying that is that obviously if Mane starts at striker, he's almost an out of position midfielder and will make him quite an enticing option to go for, and might even be a replacement for his colleague, which is going to be Salah. But I just want to kind of talk to you guys about Mo Salah, because throughout this video you guys might question why he's not in my captaincy decisions, why I haven't really recommended him as a transfer in or transfer out, that sort of thing. But I'm just going to simply wait for that press conference, and in the team selection tomorrow we might get some more news. But now going on to the next talking point, and this is going to revolve around rotation in Game Week 38. So the kind of final game week of this season, Game Week 38, always has a couple of surprises in store for us. We average more goals in the last game week of the season than any other game week in the Prem, but with the goals also come some more rotation. Now, because it is the final game of the season and because it is the final home game for most teams, maybe some teams have it in Game Week 37, we might actually see some rotation of older options coming into the side just so they can get that last home game under their belt. For example, Mark Noble, although he didn't start the game, came off the bench, but we saw David Silva, I think last season or the season before. A lot of speculation went about his start. He actually ended up playing, but unfortunately I don't think he got any returns. Now, most sides that have something to play for, like West Ham did against Man City, it's kind of securing that Europa spot or that Conference League spot. Those teams with something on the line might not rotate that much, but if a team doesn't have much to play for, kind of mid-table, already in the top 4 like a Chelsea, they might play some more veteran options just because they probably will depart the club in the summer. So just keep that in mind, but my kind of general thinking behind this Game Week 38 is play the best players as possible. We might get some early team news, and then obviously you can act on that, but right now don't plan those transfers with rotation in mind. Saying that though, we do have some Game Week 37 games happening tonight. I'm going to be keeping my eyes on Jamie Vardy and Maddison in their game against Chelsea tonight, because if Jamie Vardy does get rested, I probably will transfer him for that lovely Southampton at home game. But I think as long as you guys are prepared for rotation and you kind of take as much information as possible in, you'll probably make a pretty good FPL decision at the end of the day. But now let's get into the actual meat of Game Week 38. In terms of the fixtures, if you guys did watch yesterday's video, I actually went over these fixtures in quite a lot of depth, went through each of them one by one, kind of discussing what fixtures I'll be targeting. I'm going to simply skip that step in this video, so you guys can go check that video out yesterday that I did create if you want a more in-depth fixture analysis. But in this video, I'm just going to tell you guys the fixtures that you guys should be targeting with those transfers. So the first fixture on the left-hand side, it's going to be Chelsea versus Watford. In my opinion, I think this rivals kind of Spurs for the best game in Game Week 38. I think Watford are terribly defensively, and Chelsea at home, with something to kind of prove in front of their fans, I do think they're going to put on quite a few goals. Now we do have a Reece James and Alonso. I'll be keeping my eyes on those options in tonight's game against Leicester. If they do play the majority of the minutes, I might be a little bit skeptical about a start on the weekend, but if they do get those minutes managed, they'll definitely be some of the best options in Game Week 38. Now, in terms of the attackers, we had news that Timo Werner is struggling with a hamstring strain. We also have Kai Havertz, who might be a big doubt for the upcoming game tonight against Leicester. So if he is out, a Lukaku or a Pulisic could be quite enticing options. You obviously then have a Mason Mount, kind of Mr. Reliable for Chelsea, who I think if he does play against Watford, will even be a nice captaincy shout. So now moving on to the right-hand side, only had one fixture to target on the left. The first fixture there is going to be Leicester, who are hosting Southampton. We saw against Liverpool kind of a couple of days ago that they are definitely on the beach, and with Vardy potentially departing at the end of the season, I think this could be quite a good game for them. So I think a Vardy and a Maddison, and maybe even a Harvey Barnes would be the players that I would target, but we'll talk about those players a little bit later on. We then move on to Liverpool versus Wolves, and I think this game is definitely one to target. I think if you guys have Trent and Robertson, you're probably laughing going into this game week 38 deadline. I don't think both those options will start, and I think there's defensive and attacking returns against this poor Wolves side. Added to that is they have the title race and also wanting to kind of fill the squad with confidence before the Real Madrid game in 6 days' time. So that's kind of a double whammy there, and I think that this Liverpool side will put on quite a good show. We've already kind of spoken about the attackers in quite a lot of depth. I think a Luis Diaz and Mane look quite good. If Salah is out, it's going to be quite interesting to see what that front three becomes. But even a Jota could be quite a nice option if Salah does miss out. The next game, talking about the kind of title race, is going to be Man City versus Aston Villa. Now, these Man City options are definitely the safe options to go for, but I don't exactly think they have the highest ceiling in game week 38. So Cancelo, KDB are guaranteed to start, but then a Mahrez and a Sterling might potentially. A full Foden should probably start as well. So if you guys do hold those assets, I'd simply just keep them. And the final game in game week 38 is going to be Spurs traveling to Norwich, and this is definitely the game that I would target for captaincy, also those safe options. The reason being is that Spurs lineup is pretty reliable to kind of predict. It's going to be Sessegnon and Emerson at fullback. It's going to be Son, Kulusevski and Kane up front. So out of those 5 options, any 3 of those should hopefully get you some points. Now, in terms of captaincy, I think the majority of people will captain Son or Kane. Son chasing that golden boot, 1 off Mo Salah currently, and there is always that penalty debate that people have been discussing over on Twitter. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think. Do you think if Spurs do win a penalty, who kind of takes it? And does the score at the time kind of change your decision? But overall, guys, to kind of wrap up the 5 fixtures here to target, I think any of these 5 fixtures have the potential to have some nuclear options in, and therefore I'll be targeting these on my transfers. Also, just the kind of point to wrap it up is that there have been a lot of goals scored in the final game weeks of the prior seasons, and therefore if you guys are going to make a transfer, I'd prefer an attacking one to a defensive one. But we're now going to head into the portion of the video where I give you guys some differentials and some teams to target for the final game week of the season. Now, in terms of ownership stats, I've used the top 10k ownership, but unfortunately with the amount of people that have actually used chips this week, the ownership has been a little bit grey. The reason I'm saying that is that 38.3% of the top 10k used a free hit chip, and therefore their ownership come that game week 37 deadline is going to be swayed by those free hits. But what you guys can do is, because I presented you with the ownership stats or the free hit stats, you guys can simply just think to yourself what the template draft was and just adjust the ownership to that. An example of this is going to be Mo Salah. So currently Mo Salah's ownership within the top 10k is about to under 10%, but I think the majority of free hitters wouldn't have had Mo Salah, so his ownership will go back to about 40%. So just keep this in mind as we go through the ownerships, and I do apologize for the information not being as reliable as usual. But the first team we're going to talk about for kind of players in and teams that I would target are going to be the Spurs assets. A little bit of a no-brainer here, but I think that there are some differentials that you guys can also look at. In terms of the kind of high ownership options, Son and Kane are definitely the 2 that most people do own. If you guys do own both of them, I think well done on getting a lot of points, because between Son and Kane, it's quite hard to predict who's going to score the most out of them. Saying that though, I am quite happy that I don't own Kane at the current moment, because it makes my captaincy decision quite a lot easier. I don't really have to decide between the English striker or the South Korean, as I simply only own Son. In terms of ownership, Son definitely has the higher ownership here, near to 100%, but do remember those free hits, whereas Harry Kane comes in with about the 50% mark. But going on to differentials, I think a lot of people might not have in their teams. It's going to be Sessegnon in that fullback position, and he has some of the best attacking stats for a defender in the prior game weeks. Against this Norwich side, you're probably expecting a clean sheet as well, so defensive and attacking returns make him quite a nice enticing option at 4.3 million. So that's the thing I like about Spurs. They have these high ownership options, the safe options, but then here and there they have some differentials like a Ryan Sessegnon that I think you guys could bring in. The next team to talk about is going to be the Chelsea assets, and as I mentioned, with Spurs, probably have the best fixture in game week 38. Watford at home is simply primed for a massive haul, and I am expecting quite a few goals from the Chelsea side of things. The first player I'm going to talk about is going to be Mason Mount, because I think he's Mr. Reliable. As I mentioned, we have some speculation about a Havertz. A Timo Werner I do think will miss game week 38, but a Havertz could always be back in that lineup, and therefore a player like a Lukaku or maybe even a Pulisic could be at risk. I think Mason Mount definitely will hopefully play. Maybe if Ziyech does feature tonight instead of Mount and he gets a rest, that'll definitely give us some insight into that selection on Sunday. But right now, let's just assume that Mount will start, and he's probably my favorite option to go for from that Chelsea attack. But the thing about Chelsea with their formation, that back five, if they do go for that formation, I think that James and Alonso, if they do start, could be great options to go for, similar to Ryan Sessegnon, offer you that attacking and that defensive threat. I just hope that both these options do feature in Game Week 38 because I personally own both, and I think if they do start, there could be some massive holes on the cards. In terms of ownership, all three of these options are owned around the under 30%, kind of upwards of 25, below 30%, so relatively lowly owned, but please also remember those free hits. I think the majority of free hitters would have kind of downgraded these options. I think on to the final team to target is going to be Leicester, and I do think that these options are slightly more differential than the other two teams, so if you guys want to kind of make up some mini league places, I think the majority of managers won't have a Leicester attacker. Now, in terms of those Leicester attackers, the first one that comes to mind is obviously Jamie Vardy there, 17.4% of ownership, and also remember that this includes the free hitters, so basically half the free hitters had Jamie Vardy in their team, so that'll make that number even less when we go back to our original teams. Now, I'm kind of hoping that Jamie Vardy gets some minutes managed tonight against Chelsea because then they'll give him a shoo-in of a start on the weekend, but I guess with the speculation about his future, he's almost guaranteed to play against Southampton on Sunday. A player that's also probably guaranteed to start is going to be James Maddison. His ownership is also pretty low, 38.3%, but with those free hitters, it's almost a direct correlation there between those two ownerships. I think his ownership, like Jamie Vardy, will come back down as the free hitters go back to the original teams, and at 6.9 million, great entry into that midfield department. Another player that will be slightly more differential and definitely cheaper than Maddison is going to be Harvey Barnes. Kind of picked up form towards the end of the season. Hasn't had a great season overall, but is quite a streaky player, and therefore he might actually have the highest ceiling in that Leicester team. Had a great game week 37, and I'm pretty sure it's going to bring lots of managers' eyes to him, and I think that if you guys want to go for a nice differential, as long as he does play on the weekend, I think that Harvey Barnes could be your man. So out of these three teams, I've kind of gone from safety and ownership to kind of differential and also higher ceilings. We spoke about Harry Kane and Son first, and then now we've moved to kind of Harvey Barnes, who's on the polar opposite spectrum there, quite cheap and also differential. But now the final talking point to go over is going to be all about captaincy, and as I mentioned earlier on, I'm not going to include Mo Salah or any of the Liverpool assets. I do think if Mo Salah does start against Wolves, he's the best Liverpool asset to go for, but obviously you guys can also go for a Sadio Mane or a Luis Diaz. My favorite option to go for in terms of Game Week 38 is going to be Heung-min Son. So the South Koreans chasing the Golden Boot, currently on 21 goals to Mo Salah's 22, and I do think he'll score against Norwich, which will be quite a nice little race. So who do you guys think will win the Golden Boot, Son or Salah? Drop it in the comments down below. I'm currently actually favoring Son just because I think Mo Salah will be targeting that Champions League final, and therefore his minutes might be managed to about 60 to 70. Heung-min Son will definitely play the full 90 though, as Spurs need a win against Norwich to secure that Champions League spot. So combining kind of form, fixture, and also minutes, Heung-min Son's my perfect captain for Game Week 38. You guys can also go for Harry Kane, but he definitely will be a little bit more differential than Heung-min Son will. And therefore, if you guys want to protect your rank, I think Son's the safe option. A nice little differential that I do favor though is Mason Mount against Watford, or kind of any Chelsea defender or attack you want to go for. I guess that James and Alonso could be quite attractive because they do offer that combination or that hybrid of defensive and attacking returns. But Mason Mount, I think he always does well against these lesser teams, and that's why I would go for him as my differential option. The last captain to talk about is going to be another Mr. Reliable. It's going to be Kevin De Bruyne against Aston Villa. So Man City have to win this game to win the title, the last trophy that they can win this season. And because KDB is in quite good form, I do think he's going to get some returns against that Villa side. I do think, however, that I'll probably favor Son over KDB just because of the kind of explosive nature. But if you guys do own the Belgium, I think he could be a nice safe option to also look at. You then obviously also have Jamie Vardy and a Maddison, but I just prefer these three options because there might be some question marks about Jamie Vardy's fitness and his minutes. But this is basically wrap up the video, guys. Hope you did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like if you did and subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. Sorry, it's a little bit of a shorter ultimate guide, but we've kind of near the season's end, and there's not much to talk about in terms of our teams. Saying that though, I'll be seeing you guys tomorrow for my team selection, and hopefully tonight's games go well and Danny Ings bangs a hattie. But I'm signing off. It's been Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers, bye.